Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Gary Summers, and welcome to the audio edition of Mind, Body, Soul. I have with me Dr. Stephen Fonso, who's going to talk about some of the concept that he talks about in his book, and we'll get into that a little bit later on. But welcome, Stephen.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to go through some of these goodies we have planned. Yeah.
Yes, and it's all the way from Thunder Bay, I guess, is it?
Yeah, Central Canada. So
Yeah.
we're right on on Lake Superior. Beautiful, beautiful spot.
Okay, so Stephen, I guess the first question, let's jump right into this because,
Sure.
lots of times we'll say to people, learn to relax, but people just, if they're not given any skills or tools, if you're on bust, how do you learn to relax? So I guess here's the first question, and let's dive right in. If
Yeah.
I am overwhelmed, where do I start?
Well, I'll give you the tool in a second. I'll give you the concept first, just so people potentially have an appreciation for what goes on in the body and in the mind. So when we're feeling overwhelmed, obviously we are in a state of defense, and the body goes into a defending type of pattern. So our muscle tissue tenses, our breath gets limited, we're potentially increasing our stress hormones. So there's a whole rampant of things that are going on physiologically when we're feeling overwhelmed, which is completely understandable. The prime mechanism behind that, though, is the body's basically in a state of fear, and that it's experiencing challenge, just like almost like a predator. The body is part of an animal, and so when we experience a predator or a challenge, our bodies naturally moves into a fight or flight pattern. Muscles tense, breathing goes shallow and quick. Our heart rate goes up, our blood pressure goes up, our blood sugar goes up. So this is a physiological response to a perceived challenge in our environment. And the body, amazingly, is reflexive in nature, meaning that it responds to the demands of the environment 500 milliseconds before the brain could consciously perceive what's going on. So your body has already decided how it's going to respond to the environment 500 milliseconds before you're consciously aware that there's actually a stressor. It's an incredible setup. And so the first thing that I recommend with people is to first go into the body, because the body is the piece that is responsive faster than the brain is. And so the body's, again, already made the decisions to experience this overwhelm and to tighten. And so the way to manage that, the first thing to do is to go in the body. Now, when we go into the body, I generally suggest a few things. When we feel overwhelmed, we want safety. The nervous system wants safety. It wants to know that it's safe from the danger, from the predator, from the challenge. So the nervous system wants to know that it's safe. So safety is the number one priority when we're in overwhelm. Well, how do we do that? Well, there's a few key points to it. One, we use the body, one, we use our hands, and one, we could use language. So we can use those three to influence the safety in the nervous system. And when we feel safe, very naturally what we do is our body already starts to rebuild our energy. So safety is an important first step in the process. So when I teach people is we go palm over palm, and we place our hands either on our chest or on our tummy. One of the space that kind of feels like you have more rapport and more connection with. Remember, you want connection, safety is connection, and connection is peace. And that all helps to ameliorate or at least navigate around the overwhelm. So go chest or go belly. And the palm over palm is important because it produces safety. If your fingers are too far stretched apart, your nervous system's not going to feel as safe as if it's like giving your system a big hug. It's like a nice tighter grip. And so we go place our hands on our chest or our belly, and we take a breath in the nose and out the mouth. And what I teach people to do is when they're doing this from a place of peace, then to say and declare what's really going on. So they might say, sometimes I feel so powerless to what's going on. Or sometimes I feel just so overwhelmed by the situation. And by declaring that linguistically, it reverberates through the nervous system. And it's like when you go to a funeral and someone's suffering, and someone's overwhelmed, all you need to do is come up, you maybe put your arm or your hand on their shoulder, and they feel your presence, and all you say is, "I'm sorry for your loss." And you don't go into a big story and a big ramble and those kind of things. They just want to be felt and heard and met for where they're at. And so when you're overwhelmed, your system just wants to hear exactly what it's experiencing. It just wants to be felt and heard and validated for where it's at. So I teach people right away, just say exactly what you're experiencing. Like, sometimes I feel so helpless, or sometimes it feels like this pain is never going to go away, or sometimes it feels like this stress will never end. And you breathe in the nose and out the mouth. In the nose and out the mouth is a peaceful baseline breath. And so we do hands on the body, because the body's reflexive in nature. So we can shift our system quite quickly there. Breathing in the nose and out the mouth is a peaceful baseline breath. And finding that place of peace on the body, combined with the validation of the proper linguistics to meet you where you're at in that moment, is very liberating for your system. And your system just opens up naturally to that. It loves to be validated and heard. So that's the way you go from overwhelm into safety first. And I find that is extremely liberating for when we're suffering in some sort of overwhelm and distress pattern, is to claim out what we're actually experiencing. And we don't suffer very well. No one really likes to suffer. That's true. And at the same time, most people haven't been taught how to actually suffer very effectively. And this is probably one of the most effective ways to suffer, is to make sure that you're validating your experience, that you're breathing in the nose and out the mouth, and that you're putting your hands on your body so that you're having a felt experience. And that's the way that you liberate energy and produce safety in the nervous system.
And I guess even going back as far as, like Maslow talked about his hierarchy of needs, and safety is certainly at the base level. I mean, if you're not safe, you can't think about anything else in life. You need to hit that safety mechanism first. So that's
Yeah.
absolutely. And I guess accepting that, your life is throwing you a curveball, and then once you can get your physiological response under control, then you can start to figure out what you need to do to fix it.
Yeah, it's perfectly said, because you're especially when you're in overwhelm, it's like your frontal lobe, the rational mind, and the creative mind, and the problem solving oriented mind is not on board. It's the body's tightest defense. It's taking all the blood, the blood glucose and oxygen is being shunted to a body that's trying to defend itself. And so you don't have a lot of resources that are available to problem solve. The problem solving, like you said, comes after the experience of safety and some level of ease to move that energy and to move that blood flow again towards more of a higher centers of the brain that can then move into problem solving. But I see a lot of people that try to problem solve in defense, and it doesn't work, because that energy is just not in problem solving mode, because a huge part of you is trying to defend and protect from the overwhelm, and it just can't really have foresight to go and plan and to problem solve. So yeah, that's been my experience.
Steve, from your book title, what does finding magic in the mess mean? You mentioned we have been conditioned to being control freaks instead of just accepting. How do you find that magic in the mess?
Well, I would say first, what we just described there is the beginning part of finding magic in the mess, which is why I started out my book with the chapter on suffering. Because if we could do that and provide a reservoir of safety for our nervous systems and our breathing and our energy first, it's helpful then to look for value in the experience. And that's really what finding magic in the mess means. Is it means what questions do I need to ask to find value in my given experience? I think most people, and hopefully your audience, from a soul perspective and from a body and mind perspective, has a sense that there's learning lessons, that there's things to be learned on every corner. And so when we have value and appreciation for something, there's a sense in our nervous system of progress And so, but when we're not finding any value in any experience, we start resenting it. And so that resentment, which produces hopelessness and angers and despairs, by not finding magic in the mess, by not finding value in the experience, we want to run away from it. And we go into more of our animal nature by not finding value in an experience. We just tend to move towards pleasure or run away from pain. And we go into an animal nature without finding value in a given experience. So once we do find value in a given experience, or at least bridge that with a good question, then we can elicit a lot more energy, and that becomes, then we mitigate the resentment and despairs and things that come along with resenting an experience.
So would it be fair to say that a very empowering way to live life would be to figure out how every person that comes into your life and every experience that you have in your life, whether that's positive or negative, is there to teach you something, is there to create value, is there to make life better for yourself if you look for the lesson in everything that happens to you?
Yeah, yes. Yes, it's definitely a wise usage of your energy to go to that place. And it's not positive thinking or negative thinking. It's actually finding value in an experience is actually accessing the neutral mind, as the yogis call it, the neutral mind, or a neutral frame, because you're seeing that the experience came with both positives and negatives, and both angles of support and challenge in a given experience, but you're valuing the lesson and the learned experience in that. And then we become resilient around that. And so when we see that as part of our life and an instruction for us to move our life forward, well, then who needs to get rid of it? Who needs to shunt it? Who needs to avoid it? Who needs to suppress it? If you value it and see that it's a valuable part of your life journey and your pathway towards,
So we can kind of throw out success and failure and view life as a lesson learned. If you're always looking, if you're looking for that, success or failure, I succeeded or I failed, then you may not get the result that you want. But if you always look for the lesson, then you'll always find it.
Yeah, and Gary, the way that we could look at it as well is, because I've worked on the breaking the duality within myself of success and failure. And so when we lower our energy state, and when we lower our orientation of our mind, we will have to decipher between whether something was a success or a failure. But when we actually work and strive towards finding the learned lesson, it transcends the duality of success and failure. And literally success and failure both rise into that space of the lesson. And so the lesson trumps any perceived success or failure. Because if you, on one hand, if you perceive it as success, there's a lesson learned. If you perceive something of a failure, there's still a lesson learned. So both get trumped by the lesson being learned, which is really finding magic in the mess.
Absolutely. So, okay. So Steve, you mentioned that teaching gratitude for all life experiences reduces stress and anxiety. And we've heard people talk about doing a gratitude journal. And I sometimes talk to my clients about, doing a gratitude list of the people in your life you're grateful for, the experiences and things like that, and your values and things like that. So just talk, I'd like to understand your views on how gratitude reduces stress and anxiety.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, I've been in practice for 17 years, and I measure a thing called heart rate variability. And so heart rate variability is a measurement of what we call coherence in the heart, and a coherence or basically an ease pattern between the brain and the heart. And so when we're not in a state of gratitude, or when we're in a state of resentment or frustration or irritation, and those things, which are part of the human experience. So I'm not demeaning them nor devaluing them. They're part of the human experience. But when we move closer and closer to states of gratitude and grace and appreciation, the actual connection between the brain and the heart of heart rate variability actually improves. It gets stronger, and the waves between the heart and the brain go from a very jaggedy type of look to them. It's really interesting. They go from jaggedy look to a very smooth orientation in the physiology, and so a lot of teachers now are measuring when they do different retreats or week-long retreats. They're measuring the heart rate variability to see, as people move through this state of grace and gratitude and appreciation from resentment and tensions and frustrations and irritations, when they move through that, the physiology and the brain waves and the heart waves are all getting more synchronized and organized at higher and higher levels. So it physiologically demonstrates that the body is in less stress and chaos and moving towards higher state of order through measuring heart rate variability. And I mean, the Institute of Heart Math is a great institute. You can go and you can check your heart rate variability. You could get stuff on Institute of Heart Math, which is a nonprofit organization of the States. And you can purchase a device, and you can upload something on your phone, an app on your phone, and you can actually check your heart rate variability for your coherence, your baseline state. And it's a great reflection of your emotional state. So it physiologically is superior. A state of gratitude is physiologically superior and more organized in your nervous system, and your heart is more organized and your brain is more organized in a state of gratitude versus a state of frustration and irritation. Again, it's all a pathway too, but so I'm not demeaning those states. It's just, that's definitely a premier state.
Steve, how or where do we create order out of this chaos to have less anxiety? And you mentioned in your book about the not enough syndrome, this perfectionism type thing. Can you spend, I'm interested for you to talk a little bit to our listeners about that.
Sure. Well, an exercise that I bring clients through very often is the perception of gain and loss. And the perception of gain and loss goes back down to the stress response and back to very primitive early underpinnings in the body, that if there's a prey as an animal, if I'm getting a prey, I'm feeling support and nurtured. If there's a predator, I'm feeling challenged and stressed. So those exist in a state of fear. When we're bringing systems to a state of order, we need to basically supersede that, and we bring it to a state of balance where I ask the question to people, what do you feel is missing right now in your life? Which is kind of like society's little dangling carrots for us. Yeah. And it's like, come get this. And we stress about it. I don't have it. Well, you could actually make a little list on the left-hand column of a page and say, what do I perceive missing in my life? And if you ask the question, where is that thing that I think is missing? What form is it in? But I'm expecting it in a different form, but what form is it actually in my life? You'll actually see how it's sprinkled through other forms, people or things, and it's actually not missing. You can break the illusion that you're actually missing something by asking a question, what do I perceive I'm missing? And then where is it actually existing in my life in a different form than what I'm seeing? And when you go in and you actually start picking it apart, you'll see if someone says, I'm missing adventure in my life. Well, they might be thinking, I need to be going on a hike, or I need to be going on a trip. Okay. Well, you think you're missing adventure through traveling or a hike. But if you ask the question, where else am I experiencing adventure right now? You might come up with 5 to 10 ways that adventure is existing in your life. It's just you have it pigeonholed to look a certain way. So when you start to stretch the definition so that you could see nothing's missing. I have adventure in my life. It just wasn't in the form that I thought it was in, but I still have it. You now find that, oh my God, I have everything that I'm actually looking for. and it changes your relationship with what you're chasing. And so that's an exercise that I do with my clients quite often when they're stressing about not having enough of this or that, or think something's missing. I did this at the beginning of COVID, when our business got shut down and when I wasn't able to practice for about 12 weeks. I asked the question of, I perceive I'm missing clients, and I perceive I'm missing this and that, and finances, and where are they actually right now? And I went through and I showed myself exactly where it all was, and I realized I'm not missing anything. It's just changing form. And it completely changed my association, my stress response, because I saw nothing's missing. It's just in a different form than what it was previous. And I was attached to its previous form. And when I detached from that and saw the new forms that it was taking, I had appreciation. I'm like, wow, nothing is missing in my life. It's just changing form, and it's all transforming.
And you have to want to be able to look for it. Steve?
Yes, yeah.
Instead of complaining, why me? Why does life not work out for me? And the why question, of course, which is problematic.
Yes.
In terms of relationships, people may ask the question, how do I transform my relationship from chaos to grace? What advice can you have for people who are in a chaotic relationship, whatever chaos means to them? Not normal, not what they want.
Yeah. Yeah, not what they want. I mean, if it's the person that they're being challenged with. What I find oftentimes, I run a bi-weekly relationship program with people, and what oftentimes we begin the process with is identifying, what is the trait or the action or the behavior or the expression that person is doing that is bothering me or irritating me or frustrating me, or that I'm resentful for. And that expression, we have them work what's called the law of transparency and ownership, which is basically owning that trait first. And when I say owning it, it's just acknowledging that you've actually displayed that trait before, so that you're not putting yourself on like a hierarchy pedestal, looking down at them saying, look at them behaving the way that they are, shame on them for behaving that way. We want to humble ourselves first in a relationship so that we're more eye to eye. So when we humble them, the way to humble ourselves in the relationship, instead of being prideful and projecting our issues on them, when we humble them, we got to see ourselves as them for a moment. And so when we see, oh my God, if they've betrayed us, where have I betrayed somebody before? And actually documenting in the mind, like, where have I actually betrayed somebody that I loved before? Oh, when I was 15, I did. And then when I was 22, I did. And then when I was 28, I did. And then, oh my goodness, when I was 28, I did that 3 times. And all of a sudden you realize, wait a minute, I've also betrayed people that I love.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're humbling yourself so that you're seeing more eye to eye. So you're not projecting your ideas of how you think they should be in that moment. We're evening the playing field a little bit. And then once you're able to do that, if you've done that and you're humbled in that, you're also beginning to open the heart and you're seeing them a little bit differently. So then I would ask, how is what they're doing serving me in my highest values? What's important to me right now? Okay, well, maybe my kids are really important to me. Spending time with my parents are really important to me. My business is important to me. My personal development or spirituality is important to me. Well, how is what they're doing? Okay, now that you've humbled yourself, how is what they're doing of benefit or of value to my highest values, so that we could see that what they're doing is actually helping you to stretch yourself in the areas that are most important. Oh, well, if personal development or spirituality is the most important and they're irritating me, they're forcing me on self-mastery. By their behavior, I had to buy 3 books and I learned new strategies and tools and tactics. Oh, okay. By them irritating me, they forced me to get creative and resourceful, and I didn't want to deal with them. So I went on a creative project and I did a painting project on self-mastery, and I derived a beautiful painting from from being irritated by them. So I could see their behavior is nudging me in my values. And when you see that person is actually kind of supporting you or helping you to grow in your highest values, now you're again changing the relationship, and you're having inherently more appreciation for them. And I'm not, I'm not saying you have to excuse different behaviors, but if we're working on being resourceful or resilient human beings, I'm saying these are the steps you might want to look at. Is first humble yourself to see where you've done what they've done, and that humbles you. And then in that humility state, now see how what they're doing is actually serving you in your highest values and serving you to what's important to you. And you'll see, if you ask the question, that they're nudging you in these different directions, and it's crystal clear. And you can have more appreciation for them, and your communication with them will change, because the communication is stemming from honesty and appreciation, not from resentment. Because how you communicate with someone in resentment, is very different than how you communicate with them in a state of grace or appreciation, right? And so the communication and expectations can change from that point.
So I remember you twigged a memory. I started out doing magic, and I remember how challenging it was when you walk into a birthday party or a lot of small kids, and they're talking and they're yelling and they're, they all want to know how it's done. And instead of me getting frustrated because they weren't the audience that I expected them to be, they were the audience that taught me resilience, that taught me patience, that taught me, okay, you got to focus really a lot on what you're doing here now. And it taught you focus. So I guess the lesson in all of this, Steve, and what I say to people is Carl Jung was a German psychologist, and he said the things that irritate us about others can lead us to a greater understanding of ourselves. He coined the term shadows. He says shadows are the things we don't like about ourselves. We can easily find fault in other people, but we can't recognize the same fault that we have in ourselves. And when we recognize that fault, our fault that we see in somebody else doesn't seem to be as irritating, because we kind of come from a level playing field. Let's finish off, Steve, with one final question, and I'll let you go. In your book, you mentioned that gratitude is more important than manners. And I found it a fascinating take on the concept of please and thank you, and forcing kids to do that stuff instead of coming from the angle of gratitude, being grateful for things, instead of having to force kids to say please and thank you and that type of stuff. So can we finish off and just, because I find that philosophy very insightful.
Sure. When I was writing that, one thing that I noticed and observed is when people were, say, caregiving, and I'll say as a parent, or we're caregiving for somebody else, and when we're doing things out of a real pure place of heart, and kind of like a bit of a selflessness in a moment, just like a very awakened experience of just serving someone for the sake of serving them. We don't need a thank you. We don't need a please. We don't need any of that in that state of coherence and that state of heart, and that state of action that comes with that. We don't need those things. So when I looked at that, I said, well, when do we need those things? Well, when we're doing things for our let's say our own pure self-gratification, or self-acknowledgement, or when we're doing it for our own sense of significance, which again, it's not wrong. I'm not putting like a moral thing on it. It's just, I just noticed and observed when we're in a state of grace in service to someone, we don't care about the thank you. Like if they didn't say thank you to us, it's irrelevant. The thank you is the actual act in and of itself of serving the other person. That's the thank you that we get by actually doing it. It's like this self-perpetuating energy that's able to be, we say thank you for it. It's almost like we say thank you for being able to serve. I remember my grandfather, before he passed, I was in the washroom with him, and I had to take care of his toiletry type of things because he was in a state of you know, distress and just was kind of nearing end of life, and I had to take care of him and, you know, do some wiping and things. And I'll tell you, I mean, when I was in that state, I was saying thank you, like, thank you for this experience. If he didn't say thank you, I mean, it wasn't even in my in my sphere of awareness for someone to say thank you. So then when we're, you know, that comes down to, like, you know, bringing your kids the breakfast or bringing them the toast, or it's like, who's bringing it to them? Because if you're just bringing them out of the love of service, then the thank you. And I just saw parents getting very, very stressed about manners and when someone is truly grateful for the experience, thank you just bubbles out. So maybe they're just really not that grateful for the experience if you have to try to hammer home the thank you. You know, it's like, maybe you're doing something that is maybe lower on their values that they don't really care about, and you have to, like, motivate them to say thank you. And they'll say thank you when they're graced with the experience, and when it's on their like very high on their values, they will say thank you, because it's human to say thank you as literally a reflexive word when we are truly valuing and appreciating an experience. So to me, that's kind of the pinnacle. And I've had enough experiences and done enough programs where I watch myself when I say thank you for the experience, and I watch myself when I don't. And I don't say thank you when I don't value something. And I do say thank you when I value something. And it's just natural and reflexive. So that's why I say you don't have to hammer this home into the kids, because it's going to happen. And you know, and we have enough examples generally when we could see that state of grace and great state of service, where we're the ones saying thank you for being involved in it, because it's so beautiful. When I get to take care of my kid if they weren't feeling well, I don't need a thank you from them. It's thank you for allowing me to be here in this moment to be with them and bring them the soup and bring them the blanket, and thank you for allowing me this opportunity. And so I don't know, that was my take. That was where it was written from, of that contrast.
We're almost out of time. What could you say to listeners right now that they could use today to make their life better?
I would definitely say one thing would be, when you go to sleep at night, make that list of things that you are truly grateful for. That will start the process. And once you're in an energy abundant state, then just take a look at a few of the mishaps that you perceived were mishaps through the day. Could be one, could be two, maybe three. And look at those mishaps and find the grace in there. Find where the magic is in those moments. When you're in an abundant state, find the gratitude first in what you're in, just the general life before you go to sleep. And then if it calls to you, if there's something niggling at you, go back and find the grace in that from a state of abundance. And it'll be there. It'll be right there. If you come at those moments with a robust state of gratitude, you'll find the magic in that mess throughout the day. And it'll clean up the unconscious for the following day, and you won't drag it through to the next day. That would be a game changer. If someone did that for 7 days in a row or 5 days in a row, they'll have a completely different experience of at least the following day. It'll be a different game.
Life-changing. Thank you, Dr. Stephen Fonso, for your time, giving your wisdom and expertise to our listeners. And, you know, I'm going to ask you to come back because I've got a lot of more questions. There's a lot of chapters in that book, and there's a lot of stuff that I want to pick your brain, because you're on the cutting edge of showing people that life can be fairly simple if we look for the lesson. Thanks again. Thanks again.
Thank you.